Good morning, good Monday morning to you. www.andrewmartinmusic.com, Riffvlog on why Christianity and capitalism are an oxymoron, why they're totally incompatible in their normative interpretations. Now, towards the end of this, I'll offer an alternative view on them, which explains why they're compatible and why it's happening. Oh my God. The coffee is damn fine. I found this like $5, sellout John Mackey Whole Foods coffee for a big tin for $5, and it's some of the best coffee I've ever had. So they're not, those integral morons aren't all bad. Anyway, I think I'm just going to keep this in my hand. Marx correctly pointed out that what capitalism does, and I believe it was one of his primary critiques of capitalism, and he's right, 100% right about it, is that capitalism reduces all human interactions to exchanges of profit and finance. And one might ask, well, what's wrong with that? Okay, well, if I have to explain it to you, then you're really just as dumb as fuck. There's a lot wrong with it from many, many different perspectives. I think my main critique here has to be with people like Jordan Peterson, who are misrepresenting both, paradigms, if I can use that word. It's bad enough that he completely misrepresents Christianity in its normative interpretations, but then he completely misrepresents what capitalism is too. Or at least to a certain degree he does. So his whole oeuvre is, in my opinion, just a complete fucking disaster. And it's basically sophistry, Look, Christianity was put in place by elites. Probably the Flavians, the Pisos. These were heavily Jewish influenced, royalty type families during the Roman era that eventually ended up being the kings and queens of Europe. And they probably extend back to the pharaohs. In modernity, capitalism is and it was brought into existence by these very same people, okay, backed by the central banking cartels, who eventually brought in the economics of fiat currency and fractional reserve lending, which was understandable in 1850 when there's less than 1 billion people on the planet and seemingly unlimited resources. But if you understand the economics of fiat currency and fractional reserve lending, you'll see that it's based on unlimited growth and unlimited consumption. This is just such an incredible problem today that it's probably irresolvable in itself. I mean, it's basically, if you've ever watched the movie Vanishing Point, where the guy's all cranked up on speed in his Challenger and he just eventually just drives it into a brick wall. That's what we're dealing with. They know it. Now, they know exactly what they've created here, and obviously there's got to be some kind of end game. It looks to be they're treating humans like cattle in these, you know, smart grid cities where, you know, we will be tracked. You know, every transaction we make will be tracked. Now, one point about that is there are those who are saying that, you know, that these controllers are going to make it so it's all free for us. Look, nothing's going to be free there, okay? It's if they're not going to give us anything free now, they sure as hell ain't going to give us anything free there. So you have, in my opinion, sort of two disasters that have taken over the planet, especially if gazed upon through the lens of spiritual honesty. Oh, what's that? Oh, we can't have that now, can we? We have Christianity, which is basically, again, in its normative form, pagan sun worship, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but let's just call it what it is. I mean, the evidence, if you look at D.M. Murdoch's work, the evidence is overwhelming, and it's not a matter of opinion, it's scholarly. It couldn't be more scholarly, you know, that Christianity is a fabrication of, you know, nature, you know, and the way the sun and the moon move around the planet and everything. And then you have this you know, life-eating machine called capitalism that's sucking the life out of everyone and everything in its lust for power and greed. And, you know, the audacity of people like Peterson to say that these two things are congruent and these two things, you know, together are just something beautiful to behold. You know, it's just like this wonderful Pareto, you know, truth that is just so incredibly wonderful and Darwinian to the point where it could never be better than this. You know, it's shockingly absurd, you know. The dumbing down of Christianity in the last 100 years is just another aspect of this that is just incredibly. I'm a great lover of pathos. I find it sad and tragic, you know, that you could pull the wool over people's eyes in so many ways and just have this massive culture of cognitive dissonance where people, you know, American Christians actually think that the Bible's true, you know, when there's not a shred of evidence for Moses and the Exodus or any of that stuff. The whole history of our tribal friends is, you know, what we might nicely call bullshit. And they've managed to convince, you know, the starving masses that their sun god is real and that they should consume. And this is the situation that we're in today. Again, even from a normative understanding, and I've said this many times, that if you look at the Garden of Eden, there was no capitalism. And if you look at the 1,000-year reign of Christ, there is no capitalism. But somehow, between 1400 and now, capitalism became the favorite mode of operation of God, you know. And just how ridiculous that is, yet how sadly tragic it is that Christianity, by and large, has completely bought the narrative that these two things are compatible and congruent and, never better. So how do we get out of this? I've said we can't. I've said the trajectory, and I've come up with a unique view of history here. I look at this last age of Pisces, starting somewhere around the time of Christ. The first 700 years of it, I call it the age of Christendom. And then the second 700 years, from 7 to 1400 years, I call it the age of Islam, or the rise of Islam. And the last 700 years, and we're not allowed to say this, of course, but the last 700 years is, in fact, the rise of Jewish supremacy. That started with the invention or the coming into existence of the first central banking, which just was incredibly coincidentally aligned with the first gun weaponry. That to me is just so uncanny. And so 7 plus 7 plus 7, 21, blackjack, and we have Nietzsche's 200 years of chaos. As this last 700 years, as the last 100 years of this 700-year epoch of the age of Jewish supremacy plays itself out, and it will play itself out. I'm not claiming to know exactly what's going on here, cosmologically and metaphysically. I have theories on it. I'm a Gnostic. I believe that Gnosticism gets us closest to the truth about what's going on here, although I'm not a Kabbalist. And I believe that the biggest difference between me and the Kabbalists is anything that I say along these lines, I'm willing to say is speculative metaphysics. The Kabbalists assert their cosmology and metaphysics as 100% fact, and they act on it. And in fact, if you look at this last 700 years of Jewish supremacy, this has all been brought in by the Kabbalists, the Sabbatian Frankists. This isn't a conspiracy theory. You can research this as much as D.M. Murdoch researched her work and find out that this is fact. This is not a conspiracy. Again, how does this play itself out? Well, it depends on who these archons are. I find the Kabbalist take on the metaphysics to be extraordinarily problematic. I as a Gnostic, an alternative Gnostic, I have my own view on this and who humanity is, created by the Elohim or manipulated into existence, probably more accurately by the Elohim. I have my take on it, and sadly it would mean that humanity just isn't that significant. We're actually slaves to these ruling elites, and how we get out of this situation is probably just not in our control. Now, I do believe, I again have another idiosyncratic belief, that within the lighted womb, within what's traditionally called heaven, the coercion and exploitation that's happening here in the darkened womb and in this dark matrix doesn't exist. And so the only hope anybody has is not to act that way, because if you act like the archons want you to act, and they want you to act through crass exploitation and coercion, they want you to be like them, corrupt. So don't act like that. don't own more than one property. Enact the golden rule, which I believe is about the only thing the crystals taught, and don't unnecessarily exploit other human beings, other life forms, for your own egoic desires and lusts. Don't do it. That's the only chance you ever have, in my opinion, of getting out of here. If you're going to act like the Archons, it means they own you. They have their stamp on you. You're never getting out. And never might be the operative word if the conspiracy theories about what this 5-grid smart city thing is, and the Luciferian agenda, because a part of this, what's going on is Lucifer, who is not Satan from the Gnostic view, lied to Adam and Eve, saying that they would become gods. And it's been a conundrum. I mentioned this in my last video. It's been a conundrum for Lucifer because we're not very godlike in our fleshly form. So to solve this incongruency, the Luciferians are going to trap our consciousness, whatever our consciousness is, they're going to trap it in this, incredible, sophisticated AI, sort of very godly-like machine. It solves the Luciferian conundrum, and the downside of it for the spark of divinity that exists within this biological machine is it can very well trap us here forever. At this point in time, in these flawed bodies, that spark of divinity that exists within us can still get out of here and come back. We're still caught within their reincarnation prison matrix, but at this point it can still come and go. But the theory goes that if they're successful with their 5G thing and their AI and their singularity, then we're just complete prisoners forever here. And now I'm not sure whether that's an accurate metaphysics. I believe it might be. I believe that in some respects that's an actual terrifying scenario. And we should not allow these people to do what they're doing. Anyway, 2 thumbs down to Jordan Peterson once again. He can't seem to get anything right, and that's probably not an accident if you view Jordan Peterson through the lens that I'm talking about here. Anyway, www.andrewmarkmusic.com, Riffvlog on why Christianity and capitalism are completely incompatible, incongruent, and never the twain should have ever met in any kind of honest universe. Peace out, peace the fuck out.